Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Tell Me Everything Fraud Girl Fridays. I'm your host, Danielle Spinelli, and today I have a really great guest on, Adam, who was referred to me by a friend. She was like, hey, this guy's making a big impact with fraud. He's going in front of Congress, and he's been on TV and on the news and, all these type of things. So really great to meet Adam. First time I ever met him was on this podcast, but it was really cool because basically this whole episode is talking about kind of what you can do out there. I think a lot of us feel kind of helpless and like, oh, I'm just vetting all day nonstop, but how can we make a difference? So talking a lot about that, and then just kind of talking war stories, like what happened to you. How did you even navigate through that? So he had his identity stolen through his brokerage. How do you even navigate through that? There's not a playbook out there that tells you, hey, if your identity gets stolen as a broker, what do you do? And how do you keep your reputation from getting tarnished because of these bad actors? So really interesting on that point. I think if you are a broker out there, this is something that you should definitely know. And on the other hand, they have an asset side as well. So we talk a little bit about on the carrier end, things that you should look for. And really that's, I think, the biggest thing, no matter how big or small your carrier side is or brokerage is, you needing to know the education out there. So I appreciate everybody listening to the podcast here. I'm hoping this has been educational to everybody on how to, officially vet people, either if you're a carrier vetting a broker or a broker vetting a carrier. And if you're a shipper, hopefully you're checking your trucks now that are pulling up to your docks and helping everybody out. Anyways, let's jump in it. And like I said, thank you guys for always listening. You guys are the best. Let's jump in it. Well, thanks for coming on the show. Adam, why don't you give a little bit of an intro on yourself and what you do and who you are and all that jazz?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you today and certainly on a very important issue. But yeah, so my name's Adam Blanchard. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tanager Logistics and Double Diamond Transport. Started both companies back in 2014. And so we've been in operations over a decade now. So I think that's a good thing. We've at least survived 10 years and trying to traverse through the craziness of this industry right now between the freight recession on our asset side and then all the cargo theft and lawsuit abuse issues on the logistics side. So I appreciate you bringing light to all these issues, and I'm excited to talk to you and your listeners about it today.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on. I know Ava Barnes referred you over to me. She's like, you got to talk to him. He knows all the things with really, we're talking on cargo theft on this one, but it's just education to people. I want people to know that, other people have experienced this thing and you're not by yourself. Hopefully everybody knows that by now, because I think this is like such a well-known issue. But also on top of that, like what are things that we can, learn from each other on, hey, this happened to me. And because, whenever I like hearing the whole story of like a cargo theft situation or any type of, fraud situation and finding out like, I wonder if we would have known this little bit of things, if this would have prevented this. And that's how we get better at vetting, because they're coming out with new things all the time. So what I guess do you guys do? And do you guys have a process within your company that you kind of follow currently? Or I know you have both sides. So do you do things differently on the asset side? It's a loaded question, I know. Sorry.
Yeah. So, first I'll say thank you for doing this. I agree with you. It was interesting when I first started speaking up on this issue, whether it was doing news interviews, I testified in front of Congress on this issue. I was a bit concerned my operations team was going to come back because our customers were going to get wind of this, thinking that we were not doing our job properly, and it could have an adverse impact on our relationships with our customers, specifically on our brokerage side. And it was really remarkable. It was actually quite the opposite. They were very thankful that we're speaking out and speaking up about this issue, because the more we talk about it as an industry, whether it is elected officials, news, podcasts, whatever we can do to bring awareness of this issue, I think the more effectiveness we're going to have as an industry in tackling this problem. So I just wanted to start there. And for those out there that feel concerned about speaking up about it, whether it's talking to you on this podcast or otherwise, please don't let that concern you. Our customers are dealing with this every day. It's their cargo that's getting stolen. So they're not naive to it, and they understand the sophistication of these criminal operations. And so I think we all do need to speak up about it. But so we have extensive processes now that consist of kind of rudimentary processes that aren't technologically advanced, all the way to using carrier onboarding and vetting systems, and we're continuing to have to evolve because, to your point, the sophistication of these criminal organizations is really difficult to keep up with. I mean, it's like playing whack-a-mole. I think I even used that term when I testified in front of Congress, but about the time you get one thing figured out, they're already doing another thing, and they're out of the country generally too. I mean, these groups, from what I understand, are out of Africa. I know they're out of Eastern Europe because I talked to one that stole my identity at one point. But it was, it's getting crazy. What we're doing right now, we currently use RMIS. We're evaluating all the different platforms out there. I think everybody right now needs to focus. If you don't have a onboarding and carrier vetting and monitoring system, you are going to get smoked. There's just no question. I mean, you have to do that. What we're having trouble with right now is figuring out an effective way to monitor and track the IP addresses these criminals are using. Because, what I really need, I think right now, candidly, is the ability to know if a phone call or an email is coming in from an IP address that's through a VPN. Now, you can get around that by standing up a server in some house, right? I mean, it's not a fail-proof way of doing it, but the reality is that even if you look at the header information that they're sending you in emails, it's still a US IP address. We just don't know if it's through NordVPN server farm or whatever's out there, right? And so, that's what we're doing. But, to back up a little bit, I think that primary thing that's helped us is really focusing on dedicated carrier base that we have. We have really, instead of posting a lot of loads, if you're posting loads, you are in front of these criminals, whether it's DAT, truck stop, or otherwise. Now, I think a lot of these TMSs, and even some of the onboarding systems, they're starting to have their own marketplaces. I'm kind of intrigued to see if this is going to root out some of this fraud. Criminals are pretty sophisticated. I think they're probably going to break through this too. But the first thing is just having dedicated carriers that you're working with regularly and picking up the phone. I think if you are only communicating via email, you're putting yourself in a pretty bad position. I mean, you've got to pick up the phone and talk to these folks. The second thing that we're doing is that before we will book a load with a trucking company that we have never worked with on my brokerage side, we actually pull up Safer and call the phone number on there. It's amazing how much that helps because, the FMCSA data that's in Safer, you enter that via your own FMCSA portal. Ours has been hacked once, but it's pretty difficult to hack that and to change the information in there. It's just, if ever there was a good thing the government did of making it difficult to do, it was this one, right? I mean, the government's always inefficient and slow. They haven't figured that out. So I think you really got to pick up the phone and call these folks when you're doing it. And then you've got to make sure you're using Carrier Form 1, some kind of a system that has freight guards. I know TIA has their own platform, but seeing if other people are having issues, and really any software you have, you got to make sure that you're checking that this group hasn't been hacked, because what's happening now is their emails are getting hacked. So even the legitimate companies' emails are now at risk, and they're able to reroute traffic back, not to the inbox, but to them. And so it's getting crazy. You know more about this than I do, but really the onboarding is a big part of it, making sure we're doing the proper vetting, using dedicated carriers, calling the Safer number on Safer, and then making sure you're checking any alerts they have through whatever platform you use.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think a lot of this starts with vetting. And I think the problem a lot of times too is people don't know how to properly vet. There'll be some sort of red flags. A lot of carriers are not black and white. A lot of them have a lot of gray area. And it's like, what do you do with that gray area when you do come across that? Because sometimes, it's a difficult load to cover. It's a tough market. Like, this load has 16,000 stops. Like, there's just craziness happening. And, you kind of those are the ones that they're looking for. And that's when they're waiting on you to be vulnerable to jump in so that you make an exception to your process. If you have a process, a lot of people, it's very surprising that they do not even have, they'll be like, oh, I just search FMCSA. I'm like, there's communities out there, there's platforms out there that have communities in place so that you can, all kind of interact. Kind of like you said, you need to know the feedback on others. So no, I think that's definitely step one on it. And I think even, there's a difference between like straight theft and then strategic theft. I think we dealt with straight theft for a long time. Even that, I don't think will ever go away. I don't think strategic theft will ever go away. I think they'll keep evolving, but I think that's the one that we can kind of control a bit, like that we can kind of have more parameters on. But like you said, they're even living in these good carriers' emails. Like they're sitting, even like I've seen it where they route it directly to the deleted file, and they just live in that deleted file until, like I've seen one carrier was 6 months that they were going back and not stealing anything. They were just taking stuff and taking payments. And then eventually they started stealing, and that's how they found out. So pretty crazy.
One thing we have found pretty helpful recently too is load tracking. Now that gets pretty expensive, if you're using MacroPoint or ForkHeights or there's a few others, but we actually just prevented a theft. If it wasn't last week, it was week before, because we were tracking the load and the driver was like a half a mile from the shipping facility. And so we called the shipping facility and said, please go outside and check all of the information related to this truck. We'll come to find out it was a different trucking company. We were like, unload the trailer immediately. And so I think we're going to get to the point where we're going to have to be tracking, and it's relatively easy with software now where they can, integrate via an API so that through their ELDs, right? So it doesn't always have to be through the phone, but tracking, I think, is going to be a big part of this and monitoring where these trucks in fact are.
Oh, totally. And I think it's going to get to the point where couple things. There's over like 500 ELD companies, and all of them do not have cybersecurity health at all. So I think ELDs will start getting compromised. This is my prediction. So I think you're going to have to do things on multiple levels. I think you're going to have to track via phone. I think you're going to track via ELD, and then I think as well doing some pallet tracking, especially on high value, high risk loads. And I think even the pallet tracking things have become more affordable. Have you guys ever used that even like on your asset side at all?
We have a customer that does include that on some of their freight. And it's a lot of it's temperature controlled freight too. So it's not just monitoring location, but it's monitoring temperature to make sure that when they pulp the product at the receiving facility, that they can make sure that the reefer was on continuous, all the things we know, right? So it's a kind of a dual purpose device. I've never personally seen it, but I agree with you. I think that we're going to have to find a low cost tracking solution. The problem is, here's my concern with that. I feel like we're taking our birthdays away right now. It's like, oh, we're going to figure it out, and then they're going to find some way around it. But I'm based out of San Antonio, Texas. As everybody knows, there was a lot of people coming over the border. Well, for that reason, there was a lot of pickup trucks that were getting stolen in San Antonio, and they'd rip the back seat out, take them down to South Texas to transport people until they got caught, and they leave them in a bar ditch. But when I bought my pickup, they tried to sell me an aftermarket load jack on it, and I didn't buy it. I thought it was expensive. I thought it was unnecessary, and then it got stolen. I was beating myself up, and I was talking to this officer that was taking the report, and I was like, sir, really sorry, but I just turned down this tracking device. Would that have helped me? And he started laughing. He goes, son, I see those on the road all the time. They've got sniffers. They're going to sniff those out, rip them out. They're going to be on the road. It's not going to help you. And so my point is, I'm afraid when we get these tracking devices in pallets, they're going to have some kind of a sniffing device that's going to find them too. So ultimately, I don't know what it's going to take to get this done. Ultimately, what I really think it's going to take, we can take, there's only so much private industry can do, in my opinion, to fix this. Ultimately, what is going to deter crime is having a dedicated federal task force that is going to start investigating and prosecuting these criminals. This is a low risk, high reward crime that they're able to act with complete impunity. There is no law enforcement agency focused on this. And that's the whole purpose of our criminal justice system is law and order. And when these criminals can act without any recourse or repercussions, they're going to continue to operate. And I think if we can really focus on our efforts that I've personally been working on at the federal level, where we get the FBI and Homeland Security, probably with FMCSA, to have some kind of a coalition to investigate, then they actually have the reach to go overseas. The FBI certainly, if they can find them in a different country, have the ability to go prosecute them. And so I think until some people start getting indicted, going to prison over this stuff, we're just going to be chasing our tail.
And I think you're definitely right. And I want you to talk about what all you've done with Congress and stuff like that, because I think that's on at the end of the day, if they're just locking people up and they're coming back up, or they're not even able to lock people up because it's just property crime and whatever. I mean, these bad guys are not only just doing cargo theft most of the time, or like, logistics theft. There are a lot of times all over the place doing, bank crime, or like the Armenian game that got, stopped in California. They were doing sex trafficking and what all sorts of stuff. Like, these are not just bad guys in just logistics. Like, usually they are fingers everywhere. And so I think because it is like logistics, and so many people were not talking, like we talked about in the beginning of this. So many people were hiding, that this happened to them, and they were not want to talk about it because they were scared about losing their customer. And I think finally we're all talking about it and we're making a headway. And so people are finding out about it. And, like you said, going on the news and making just the general public aware. I think that's step really one that we should have been doing a while ago. And yeah, so talk more about kind of what all you've done, to like with like you meeting with Congress, what all happened, what were you there for?
I kind of got roped into testifying in front of Congress, I think, in the last year. I was actually, I'm very involved with the Texas Trucking Association. I'm on the executive committee there. And I'm also very involved with the Truckload Carriers Association and ATA, but real involved with those industries. I'm real close with the president of the Texas Trucking Association. And I was telling him one time at some meeting we had, all this crazy stuff that was happening. So he goes to DC, and ATA is trying to get a bill filed up there that would create this, coordinated federal task force to investigate this. Well, he was scheduled to go. Then he calls me and goes, "Will you go testify with me?" I'm like, "Okay, John, I will do that." Well, next thing I know, he has bailed. I'm up there by myself with the American Trucking Association. They did a phenomenal job, by the way. And so I'm there in front of the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee. So Senator Ted Cruz is now the chair of the Senate Commerce Committee with the Republicans taking majority. He's a U.S. Senator from Texas. Had an opportunity to meet him several times, and he really took note of this. And so he scheduled a hearing on this subject so that the U.S. senators, which is really where you get stuff moved up there for most practical purposes. And so I was asked to sit on a panel of four. It was me representing the American Trucking Association. There was a gentleman from Academy Sports and Outdoor. For your Texas listeners, they'll know that it's our Dick's Sporting Goods down here. And he was there on behalf of the National Retailers Association. Then there was a gentleman that was head of security for BNSF on behalf of the Rail Association. And then there was an executive from OIDA. And very seldom do all four of our organizations align on policy, but we were certainly aligned on this one. And so we testified about what we had experienced, took questions from the U.S. senators on the subject. And, it was really remarkable that you see how divisive things are through the news and social media and all that, but we were getting really pointed, encouraging questions from both sides of the aisle. I mean, there's U.S. senators from New Mexico, some from, Arizona, some surrounding states, and they pretty unanimously said, this is something we can all work on together. And so since then, there has been a bill filed, and it's been filed in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. House. It is the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. And there's a lot of co-sponsors on it. I just got back from DC last week for a call in Washington I did with TCA, and everybody I talked to from the Texas and Oklahoma delegation seemed very receptive to supporting it. I think at this point, it's just a matter of how we're going to get it done, because up there is very frustrating. I work in Texas a lot on tort reform. It's much different up there. You kind of got to find some big omnibus bill you hang it on to get it through. Now, with that being said, the Surface Transportation Act, which is all of our highway funding, is coming up next year, hopefully the first of the year. And so it may be a really great opportunity for us to include that in the bill, if that's possible. I don't know all the specifics. It has to be germane to the bill. I assume it is, but if not, maybe there's hope they can get it together. They got to open back up, last I checked, but get back to work. But hopefully we start, we can push that through in a bipartisan manner and see what we can do, because until we do that, I think the crime has to meet or exceed $1.2 million for the federal law enforcement agencies to get involved. Well, the average cargo theft's $200,000. And so you're just never going to get there. So that's kind of the crux of the issue.
Right. And so I'm good buddies with the California Highway Patrol Cargo Theft Task Force it's south of the SoCal, so Southern California. The four guys, they handle all of Southern California. Of course, there's like a LA branch, and then there's Northern California. So they have like 3 branches because California is, the biggest state. And they've kind of been paving the way for how things I feel like should be done throughout the whole US. Of course, there's other agencies I know in other states. But I really hope that there's not even like a universal database that you can say like, hey, this was stolen here by this guy, and then he jumped to another state and he's stealing here. Like they're not just doing this in one area, and it's going across state lines. So it is a federal matter. It is not just a state matter. Like even the California guys, they'll even have to go to like the Arizona border, and they're waiting until they cross over, and they just sit there, and then as soon as they do, they can grab them. But why not get them as soon as you could? Because who knows what could happen, before that. So it's definitely a wild thing, and I really hope that we get it, make enough of a stink where we can make a difference. So it's cool you're doing that.
Yeah, TIA was at the hearing. I mean, I know they're engaged in this as well, which is great. And I will say though, Danielle, the FMCSA actually is now accepting reports on cargo theft. So if anybody out there is experiencing that, I encourage them to reach out to the FMCSA. I don't know the extent to what they're doing exactly. I know they're not being proactive, but I do believe they are starting to kind of consume some data in some type of a repository on it. So I would encourage anybody out there to reach out to FMCSA if they're having an issue with it. So at least we can start reporting it, to your point, because you've got to start tracking trends, I think, before we're going to really be able to get our arms around it. So whether that's going to be effective, I don't know.
Yeah. Luckily, we've had like Travelers, CargoNet that kind of have been doing those reports for us. But no, you're right. And so FMCSA, like Ken Riddle with the registration, I think they made a big difference as far as new carriers coming on board. And I've kind of been talking about how before it was like if a carrier was brand new, you're like, I'm not touching you because who knows what's going on. And I almost feel like now that they've made a change, I'm not like guaranteeing that this guy's a good guy, but at least I know now that they've had to do that facial recognition, at least I know like at the end of the day, this is the guy, and it's not been lingering for a long time. And maybe, because he just got started, whatever. So you can kind of build those relationships. So I guess what's going to be interesting is with the different changes that like FMCSA makes, for instance, or whoever, how we're going to have to continue to vet, because we are going to have to keep vetting. I don't think that's ever going to go away. Yeah.
Yeah. And I wish there was more outreach to the small independent owner operators out there too, where they're not taking double blind shipments. Like if you're getting paid a ridiculous amount of money, and then when you pick up a load and you're not delivering it to the destination that's specified on the bill of lading, there should be a lot of red flags going up. And so that kind of frustrates me because, we had our identity stolen at one point. And so we were getting a bunch of really upset drivers calling us saying, where's my payment? I'm like, that wasn't our load. I'm very sorry. But we started receiving the amounts they were told they were going to be paid for these loads, given the mileage and the cargo that they thought they were hauling. I'm like, who in their right mind would think they're getting paid $6,000 to go from, Texas to, Illinois? I mean, it was outrageous. And so I think there needs to be a little bit of a proactive approach too with OIDA or whoever represents the small operators out there, because they're the ones that ultimately get hung out to dry. I mean, they're the ones that don't get paid for the load. I mean, certainly our customers do as well with the loss of their freight, but ultimately that's coming back on us through our cargo insurance, but they're the ones really getting hung out to dry.
No, totally. And a lot of them are operating load to load, and they're just trying to get out, they can't afford to not get paid on a load. But I definitely, like, I've been on, I'm actually going on SiriusXM today. I've been on SiriusXM on the Road Dog channel. I've been on OIDA. And so I think they are making a big difference, but it is getting education out there. Like to me at MATS, there should be a huge section in MATS where they're talking only on things to look for and red flags, because like the blind shipments, why I'm like, that's one thing that I'm like, why are we still doing this? There's got to be a better way I understand the idea behind a blind shipment and why is kind of needed, but there's got to be a better way. Like it is remarkable that we have not done anything on this. And then the carriers, I'm like, to me, what's really weird is I think whenever it's the delivery address is a different address. That is rare. Most of the time it's the shipping address that is different. Obviously I know with blind shipments, it can be the double and it can be whatever, but whenever it's the receiving end at a different address, you should be super on red alert, no matter what. Like there's got to be a way to vet that and, make phone calls and as a carrier. And I had a carrier who, which I want to hear like all your horror stories too on your cargo thefts, but I
Happy
had
to relive them with you today.
a
I've been doing it recently, so let's
so fun.
hopefully we
I
can get it
know.
over with, get the word out, and then we can all laugh about this one day.
I know. I had a carrier that was like, it was a lot of avocados, and they backed up to it was a double blind shipment. They backed up to, got told like to back up in the middle of the street and back a U-Haul back up to them. And then they offloaded. And so the whole time the driver's filming this, and he's like, I don't have a good feeling about this. And obviously letting it happen. And it was a U-Haul, and they were able to kind of get it. I doubt they got the product back, but they were able to kind of see who it was, or and now they have those licenses that says no name given and whatever. But anyways, I'm like, that should have been a huge, like, I would be like, I'm leaving and I'm going to call somebody else to help me. Like, I don't trust this at all. I'm not doing this.
Yeah, and I think too, we just recently talked to a customer of ours and said, certainly they're not going to go hammer the people they're buying product from, right? Like we do a lot of food and beverage stuff to grocery stores. And we recently had a load stolen. Well, this shipping facility that was making these tumblers that was stolen, kind of off-brand deal, they had no cameras. They had no information that they collected when a truck got there. So this group took off with this entire truckload of reasonably higher value product, right? I mean, was not Yeti, it was kind of an off-brand deal, but well, we use Travelers as our cargo insurance. Their investigation division is absolutely phenomenal. But when you have no information related to the truck that bumped that dock, there's not a lot you can do. Now, we did recover some cargo earlier this year where there was cameras, and then there's a camera network all over the highways, right, that they can get into to try to locate the path of this. And it's called something, you probably know what it is. But if you don't have anything at the point of origin related to the truck at all, then there's nothing to go find. And that's the problem. And so I think everybody has to take a little bit of responsibility in the cause of some of these thefts. I think we all need to be quite proactive throughout the entire, supply chain here.
And I definitely think you're right. I think shippers are having things happen to them, so they are becoming a little bit more educated. But also, I think this is like a great way when you're initially vetting or like getting a shipper on your form. Like, this is questions you should be asking. Hey, what security measures do you have? And things like that. And then almost rewriting their shipper broker agreement to reflect, hey, this is what I'm expecting you to do on your end. But, you said you do X, Y, and Z. So because you do X, Y, and Z, I will take this liability, because you don't do this, then unless if you make changes, this is going to be my liability. And I think that's like an interview question you ask each new shipper or each shipper you get.
Yeah. The problem we had is that the facility that we were picking up from was not our customer's facility. They were buying from this company. And so there's kind of that second degree of separation, which is why I was bringing this to light with our customer, because if it was their facility they were picking up from, to your point, I think that's a great idea. And I think that's going to have to be a point of discussion at some point, because if this continues, insurance is going to drive that conversation, because ultimately insurance is going to say enough, and it's going to start being excluded from these policies, these cargo policies and contingent cargo policies on the brokerage side. And when that happens, certainly we as an industry can't assume all of the loss for every load. We would all go out of business. This is a tight enough margin business. There's not enough juice to squeeze out of us to cover these losses. So I think unless everybody starts working in coordination throughout the entire supply chain, insurance is certainly going to start driving some changes.
Yeah. And even just the insurance pricing. And so, like you mentioned, like before we started recording, like your insurance going up. And yeah, so it's like there's got to be a way to I don't know. To me, that's one thing. Like, and that takes education. That takes communicating to other brokers and kind of building that network and things like that. I want you to, I guess, let's hear your horror stories. Give me a good one.
Oh man, where do I start? I mean, hostage loads. Those are always interesting. Thank you.
Do you feel like the hostage loads is, I mean, like the one from July 4th a while ago, where they take 40 loads. I think that was 2024's July 4th. Where they were holding a hostage, 40 grand. Obviously, they probably would have never delivered it. FBI did get involved in that one. But do you feel like a lot of the hostage situations is a fraud? Really, like they actually are going to take it, or do you feel like no matter what, your load's always stolen?
Yeah, in our instance, it wasn't stolen. It was just simply an aggrieved small, one truck operator that wanted to get paid more on the layover than we had in our broker carrier agreement and our rate confirmation. I mean, and layovers are pretty standard in our business. And so he just was trying to shake us down for more money. I've only seen one of those. I'm not seeing that to be as prevalent or impactful of a situation as the new cyber crimes that we're seeing, this strategic theft. I think that's becoming much more prevalent and much more impactful on our industry and the overall macro economy. And we're talking $5 billion plus a year in cargo theft. It may be more than that. But now I think, those stink. But really, the worst situation was when our identity was stolen. That was absolutely my worst nightmare. I hope
That was
and
on the
pray
brokerage
that
side, right?
it was. So best I can figure is that we had a group of criminals representing themselves as a trucking company, called us on a load. We sent them our packet, and then they stole my logo, a lot of my information, and started representing themselves as Tanager Logistics, which we know how the game goes, right? They were still pretending to be a trucking company, getting loads from another brokerage. And then they put on the other hat saying, hey, we're Tanager Logistics. You want to take this free because we've been around a long time. We have a good reputation and, people trust us. Well, that was absolutely the worst thing because it started where they were just making little modifications to the domain for our emails, right? So we're at tanagerlogistics.com. They had at tanagerlogisticsllc.com. And then they would mistranscribe a letter in there. And so, and really all you can do when that happens, I recall my IT director at the time took the charge on this, but I think all you can do is go to ICANN and contest that domain to get them to take it down. And maybe it's a Microsoft thing. I can't remember what happened, but they'll take it down and then they just start another one. And so there's no way to find where they are. And we even had people that had emails sent to them by these fraudsters, and we're trying to get the email header, find the IP address, but we simply don't have the sophistication to break through those VPNs that they use. And so we don't know where they are. And that was the worst because at that point we start getting bad reviews because we're not paying people. Well, we can't pay for something we didn't ask you to transport. We got all the factoring companies started getting fired up with us. So I had to go to every major factoring company and tell them to turn my credit off. So I had to have an entire group of my accounting team validate every single order and approve it with every factoring company so that we weren't getting in a situation where they were starting to adversely affect our credit. And so that to me is probably the worst situation I've had.
Were they posting the loads like on a load board?
They hacked my data account at one point. And so they started posting, got that figured out, got them off of the data account.
Yeah.
So that was part of the problem. And the problem at the time was Dad didn't have two-factor authentication. So real easy to hack if you don't have 2FA. I mean, that's just insane to me that there would be any major industry load board that would not have two-factor authentication. Fortunately, now they do, but they managed to hack our account vis-a-vis my login, which is, you can imagine, as the CEO's the master login. So they were able to add new users and do a bunch of stuff, which was crazy to me. And then they actually, one point, hacked our FMCSA account and changed the email. Fortunately, we review that monthly and got it fixed, but they changed our phone number and maybe email. And then what's even worse, and this is what I told Congress, is there is, I think probably still currently, there's another Tanager Logistics on FMCSA. They filed for authority. It's a motor carrier authority, but we reported that to FMCSA. They wouldn't take it down. And so people that aren't vetting, as we were talking about earlier, they're just seeing another motor carrier Tanager Logistics up there, assume it's us. Now, they haven't filed their insurance, so they're not active. But if you're just doing a cursory look and not doing your homework, which unfortunately a lot of people do, as you mentioned earlier, and we couldn't even get them to take it down. And so it was literally the most helpless feeling I've ever felt in my life. I tried to contact my cyber insurance policy to see if they would help. They're like, what's your loss? I'm like, reputational damage. They're like, there's no quantifiable loss. We can't help you. Your policy doesn't apply. So I had no resources even at the insurance level. Yeah, FBI didn't answer calls back. Homeland Security wouldn't help us. Texas Department of Transportation. I called everybody I could think of. I was calling in favors that I didn't even. We all have chitlets, right? I was trying not to cash in every favor I had, but I was trying in that moment. And fortunately, we ended up getting these criminals on the phone because we saw a load posted by us. We called on behalf of our trucking company. Double Diamond, and got them on the phone, asked them a bunch of information, validated it wasn't our load. Then we said, hey, by the way, guys, this is Tanager Logistics. You need to stop using our name. We're coming after you, which was obviously a very hollow threat at the time, but it worked. They went and found some other poor company out there that I'm sure they turned around and started using their identity too. So it's a hard thing to manage. And, the reputational damage, you spend all this time. I started with one truck with my partner back in 2014. I mean, we put our blood, sweat, and tears into growing these two companies. And, to have somebody come in and have a adverse effect on your reputation, which is key in this industry, is just a very helpless and pretty horrible feeling.
Well, and I think it kind of goes back to what we talked about earlier, where the small trucking companies really need educational pieces, because even that, like, they need to vet their brokers, like, for the love of God, vet your broker, like, make a phone call to FMCSA. Now, they probably created the FMCSA account because carriers don't even really know how to look up if it's active or not. They would just see a phone number and an email and be like, oh, no, it's the one that's this address. They're like, oh, okay. And then they call that number. Like, that could happen.
The problem, Danielle, after that is they started spoofing our emails. So now it looks as though it's coming from me. I mean, it's happened to me too with like approving wires and stuff, which are obviously very fraudulent, but they're spoofing your email now. So that's, to your point, they need to go on FMCSA. Clearly our domain's on there with contact email, right? But when they're spoofing your email, again, they're just getting more and more advanced. That what do? You don't really know if it's coming from me. And if they're redirecting the traffic back on a reply to that email to them, like, what do you do?
Yeah, like at my company, we handle insurance monitoring. And one of the things that we really had, luckily we've always done this and just kind of proactively before this kind of became a thing, but we noticed that we were getting alerts all like pretty constantly of the spoofed emails coming in from insurance certificates. But what was happening is the carrier would know that there was no insurance on there. They know that we were going to request it. Like the broker would be like, oh, you have no insurance, whatever. And they can also even see that when they do their packet. But, they knew. So they knew to like, oh, I'm going to wait 5-10 minutes. Then I'm going to send an email, spoof it with the insurance name. So luckily we have always had that. But like the uptick on that, once that became like their scam, was just insane. So yeah, it's
why you got to start tracking IP addresses. I don't know any other way.
But even VPNs, it doesn't mean that they're bad. You know what I mean? Like there's great company. Like my old company uses a VPN at my brokerage, and they had a carrier side. They use VPN just to keep their stuff safe. So it doesn't mean that they're bad. So that's what's hard. It's like it's hard to say like who is good, who is bad, because there is so much gray area. And I think putting people in that bubble. Now, I do think having that information in front of you, and so you can vet further, ask more questions, make that phone call, all that things. You need to have that information. That's where tech comes into place. But it's not a for sure yes or no, which is so hard because we're moving so fast.
Well, it was interesting too. OIDA's big point when we testified in front of Congress, or a major point, was that FMCSA needs to do a more thorough job of vetting new companies coming into the industry. I mean, if you've done this before, you know how easy it is to get authority. You literally just fill out some paperwork and you're in business. And then you have a new entrant audit, but I think they're all behind on that. I don't even find that to be particularly effective anymore, but they need to have some heightened standards for people coming into the industry. If not, then what's really the point of us being licensed? If anybody can get a license, it to me, logically speaking, it makes the whole process kind of pointless. If there's not any kind of vetting or prerequisite requirements before you come in other than insurance, like, why are we even doing it? I mean, they need to be a little more particular. They need to make sure they're a legitimate company, that they, have a headquarters. I mean, there's enough technology out there, I would think, that they could use to validate that these people are who they say they are.
Now, I do know that the virtual address things, they did stop that. They did that. It was early last year. And then they did come up with the IDEMIA, like same thing that, Clear uses for facial recognition when they're filling out a registration form, but they're not checking like the business license, making sure that matches. They're not. And to me, like if you're like a hairstylist and you're getting your license for that, you have to submit in a certain amount of hours. You have to do this. To me, like even they don't even require them to turn in a CDL. Like, how do you even know that this is even a trucking company, especially like a one truck show? They have a CDL. Yeah, that's wild to me.
Yeah. I'm a licensed attorney too, so I've gone through plenty of vetting myself. It's a tough license to get, and they're already doing it when they get their CDL. I mean, each state's Department of Transportation has a whole lot of information on these individuals. I would think you could have some interagency coordination there, but it is the government. So hope springs
Well, and
eternal.
that's where that Corca comes in, that bill comes in that you were talking about earlier. Like that's where that, I think if we have something in place like that, we can start having those conversations where it's like, hey, let's have this license or this entity talk to this entity so we can say like, yeah, this is their CDL. It is valid, not just like a picture. Because even that's another thing. Like even for us, like we can't even run a CDL to see if it's even legit. So it's like, how do we know, if this is like a legitimate driver or not? Because those are fake all the time when they go to shippers and so forth. Yeah, that's crazy.
I don't know what AI is going to do either. I mean, you can replicate a lot of stuff with AI these days. I've been pitched by a few companies on, the picture with the license and, validating it through their software system. And I'm like, what's AI going to do to this thing? I mean, that's exploding right now. I think it's a little overplayed operationally, in my personal opinion, at this juncture, but certainly in terms of masking an identity or having a fraudulent identity, I do think it certainly is there now. So I'm just afraid that AI is going to supercharge this problem.
Right. Yeah, I did a series on my Frog Girl thing about BOL manipulation, and all you got to do is throw that into AI, and all those little edits that we would look for, like the, white out was back in the day, or, this being a little bit changed, or, it's a little bit off font, a tiny bit, like that isn't happening. They look spick and span with AI editing them. So, yeah, it's definitely a wild thing.
Yeah. From all the people you've talked to, what do you find to be most effective to prevent theft when you're vetting carriers? I mean, other than those that you've worked with, but I mean, what are things that you found to be helpful? What am I not doing right?
I definitely think you're right with making the phone call on the FMCSA number. Like, it just even to me, that's at the point of rate confirmation, though. So it's a little trick. Like, you need to be doing things ahead of time, and I have a whole spiel on that. But at the point of you sending a rate sheet, and definitely do not send that pickup number. You better hold dear to your heart. Like, do not give that thing out until you have a bunch of stuff happening. But no, when you're sending that rate sheet, making that quick phone call to the FMCSA number, like, hey, just send this rate sheet to so and so, just making sure you got it. I mean, like, it doesn't that's a quick phone call. That's not taking a lot of time. That to me is foolproof. And then I think to me, you need to get on a driver level, knowing who you're working with. And so like, I hate plugging out my company, but my company does a VIN verification where you text the driver, they take a picture of your truck showing your VIN number, it grabs the picture, makes sure it's live photo, grabs a picture, says if it belongs to that carrier, and then grabs their location. And then that's kind of the only way you can know. And then you can send that information to your shipper and say, hey, this is the VIN, this is what it should look like. Even like, hey, this is a red truck. Because a lot of times they're not checking anything. But if you tell a dock worker, hey, it's a red truck that should be pulling up, here's the picture of their side door, sometimes they look at that, not all the time. But to me, you got to get on, there's a carrier level on things, but I think at the end of the day, you also got to get on a driver level, because sometimes you just even have bad, like the carrier looks fine, but it's a bad actor on the driver level that's doing a bunch of stuff like that too. So I have a whole process that I have written up, but it's a lot.
It's a lot. Well, what's frustrated me too is just the prevalence of dispatch services too in the industry. Yeah, but we had a case of a stolen load, and I still believe in my heart that dispatch service was involved. I can't imagine how they were. And I'm not sitting here, disparaging dispatch services. They're certainly a necessary thing in our industry, but I think you got to be real careful when you're working with them. I think it should be a little bit of a raise the antenna. Let's do some extra vetting, because we've had a lot of double brokered situations with dispatch services too. They tell us that they're using one trucking company. We find out it's another one. We actually had not a theft, but a cargo damage claim. Well, we reached back out to them. We'll come to find out they're like, sorry, it was actually this company, but they do have insurance. We're like, whoa. This doesn't work that way. You've got to, who you say is doing it has to be doing, because we're vetting them. We're looking at that carrier's insurance and all of their other prerequisite requirements to qualify, because it's, to us in our RMIS system, our standards for carriers are much more than just having active authority and being in operations for X amount of time. I mean, we look at all of their safety scores and all of the other things. So to me, that it still concerns me, that space.
Totally. No, I totally agree. I think there needs to be more standards on maybe even just what us brokers put on dispatching services. Like, for instance, I feel like if they were to disclose, hey, by the way, I'm a dispatch service calling on behalf of so and so, and then go through everything. Hey, we agreed on rate, whatever. Because legally, they are not supposed to sign contracts or rate confirmations unless if they have power of attorney, 1099 employee or W-2 employee. And I think regardless, it's where, hey, you can send all this to me. I'm having the driver do that. Call the carrier and verify that I'm here and that he's the one doing it. I think there's a lot of things as a dispatching service that if you are a legitimate dispatching service out there, you should be taking those proactive, attempts to tell your broker, hey, basically, like, I'm a good dispatch service, which without saying I'm a good because I'm going to be like, you're definitely not a good dispatch service if you're saying that. I don't believe you. But I think having the proactive notion on things possibly is an answer, but even that, that's scary too.
Well, I know our industry associations are working real hard. And so those of your listeners that are out there that are, whether they're on the brokerage side or the asset side, I really do encourage them to get involved with our national associations. I know the dues, it's never fun to pay dues, but they really are focusing on this issue for us. And so I think being involved with that, even if it's just letting them know what's going on, they're advocating for us up on Capitol Hill. Their state associations working on state issues. This really, I don't think in any respect can be tackled at the state level, but those industry associations are doing a good job. So I think your money's well spent, and having the opportunity to go up there and talk to your legislators, it is one thing for staff for an association or lobbyists that you hire to talk to these folks, but they're talking to them every day. And so does it matter? Yes. But when you go talk to your Congress member, you go talk to your U.S. Senator or their staff, they take note of that. I mean, we are their voters. They do represent us, and they take that seriously. And so we have found that advocating at our level and actually telling the stories does help advance these things.
Yeah, I think even just as simple as sending an email to them, like, hey, this is what happened to me, and telling their stories, because they do take into account, like, hey, we've gotten this many people saying this to us. This needs to become a priority. And there's the logistics industry is not small. There's definitely enough of us out there that I think we can make an impact, but it is everybody putting on their bootstraps and doing something. It can't just be a big group or a big broker or a big carrier that does it all. It's mainly affecting the small guys, and the big guys, they can eat those losses where the small guys can't.
Tell you what, if this keeps up, our cargo insurance is going to be as expensive as our auto liability, I'm afraid, which is a little concerning for me. So I'm hoping we can get this thing tackled.
I love it. Well, we can kind of wrap up here. I know you've I really appreciate your time coming on here and kind of giving your knowledge and all the things that you've been through and all that you're doing too. I think there's a lot that everybody can do, just like we just talked about. So it's cool that you're actually doing all the things and all that. So, I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to bring up or talk about?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to be on here. I hope your listeners gain some value out of it. I hope it wasn't just a kind of us complaining the whole time. I think there's certainly a way in which we as an industry can unify and tackle this thing together. And, we're based out of Texas, but it's going to take people from every state. And so thank you for having me on, at least for what you're doing. And just, hope springs eternal. We're going to get our arms around this one way or another. It's just a matter of how long it's going to take. So I look forward to continue to fight the good fight. And I sure hope that podcasts like this bring light to the issue and others get in it with us.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, just hearing that it's happened to other people is, I guess, reassuring that, hey, I wasn't the only one, and I can reach out and say my story. And luckily, I have built up a decent amount of audience, like on LinkedIn, where people will message me and say, like, hey, this was my story. And even if they don't want to have their name tied to it, at least saying something to somebody and letting that get out there, because trust me, I'll talk to everybody. So
yeah, and I'm the same way. And people can find me on LinkedIn. I mean, it's Adam Blanchard. I own Tanager Logistics and Double Diamond Transport. We're based out of San Antonio. So if there's anybody out there that wants to reach out to me on LinkedIn, they're welcome to. Just shoot me a message, and I'm happy to talk with you and help get you in the fight, or, help. I'm not much of a counselor. I don't know if I can help you much, but on that front, but if there's anything I can help folks with, I want them to know they're certainly welcome to reach out to me as well.
Yeah, I think even just reaching out to know how to get involved, because that's probably the hardest step is like, hey, I want to help, but how do I help?
Oh, absolutely. I can help with that and get connected with the right folks just due to my involvement, leadership in the industry, both at the state and federal level. So I think that to me is one of the most critical pieces because they'll drive this thing. They will do the heavy lifting. You just got to show up,
Yeah.
really, and tell your story. It's not daunting. It's not, and going into their office is no different than going down the hall to your boss's office, so to speak, right? It's not like you're walking in, getting peppered. You're not going to the principal's office. Like they want to hear from you. They appreciate you being there. And you can even do some of them virtually or by phone call. I mean, they take calls and they note when people are calling about particular issues. And certainly as this legislation starts moving in Washington, I'll reach out to you so you can let your listeners know to just pick up the phone and ask for support to try to get this through.
Yeah. And I think, like we've been saying, like it takes an army to kind of do everything, but it's just cool that you're doing all the things. Now, whenever you're on the Congress, talking to Congress, was it at all where they were, I know you said like they don't pepper you on anything, but did they at all have like a devil's advocate on anything, or were they just kind of listening and wanting to get educated and on the consumers? Because it's everybody, it's affecting everybody.
Yeah, on this particular issue, no. They are there's not much of a devil advocate. You've got to realize that whether it's at the state level or the federal level, they are dealing with thousands of issues and they're not experts on many of them, right? So depending on what that legislative member's background is, like for me, for instance, in trucking, if I was in Congress, I would be pretty attuned to logistics related policy issues, but I don't know anything about farming. And so you really need those subject matter experts to come in and just educate you on those issues. They also have thousands of bills that they're combing through and they're monitoring. And so putting this in front of them is very important. So most of the time when you're there, you're focused on education. Now, there are contentious issues. I've fought against a vehicle mileage tax for years. There are certainly elected officials in Washington that them and their staff are on the opposite side of this issue from me. And those, they're never contentious. It's always a very respectful conversation. And I think it's not really as much about what you say, but how you say it. I mean, if you go in there very contentiously, I'm sure fire begets fire, right? I've never done that. I don't think that's very effective, but there are contentious issues, but this one certainly is not. I think this is one where it's an easy win for them, especially those of us that are in states like Texas and California where most of these thefts are happening. I just did an interview yesterday with a bunch of Fox News affiliates, but apparently the three worst states are Texas, California, and Illinois. I couldn't really explain why it was Illinois other than probably that it's the epicenter of 3PLs, but certainly makes sense with Texas and California just due to the size of our economy. And a lot of the shipments are going out there. I think several that we've dealt with seem to be getting warehoused around the LA area, but they want to hear from you and they'll be very, very cordial with you. And I think really they'll sympathize with you and try to help as best they can.
Yeah, because I think I heard the other day it's 20% of our goods that we buy, especially like high value stuff. 20% is added for in the hopes of recovering their theft and fraud losses, I guess. So that's a lot. With inflation already as bad as it is, and you can't even afford, eggs. I mean, like, come on, we need some relief. So I think this is how the world can do it.
The reality, though, is a lot of the cargo theft is not consolidated to particular types of products, right? It's not like back in the day when you're watching gangster movies and they're stealing truckloads of cigarettes or booze, right? That there's certainly a high target commodity, but I mean, we've had packaged potatoes stolen. I mean,
really?
Oh, and we
just got for months off of a cluster theft.
Yeah, they're stealing a lot of non-perishable, food products. I mean, that's a lot of what we do. So probably it's a little more consolidated just based on the freight we transport. But these are not, and I was even talking to some folks about this. I can't remember if it was law enforcement or who it was, but it's not like it's focused on TVs, booze, electronics, cigarettes. I mean, those certainly are high target commodities, but there's not really a centralized type of freight that they're targeting. So it's making it even more difficult to go to additional steps to ensure that that load that you're moving for this particular product is safe, because it's kind of like everything's fair game these days, which is, a little bit concerning.
My conspiracy theory on that is I feel like the people who are just getting started, or like maybe they're like a new employee, let's say, of this, whatever, I'm going to just say Armenian ring. And there's a lot of other ones, but like the new guys, they just do whatever. Like I know somebody that they had a whole thing of water bottles stolen. It's like, really, that was like a $3,000 claim or something. But like they're just doing whatever they can as practice so that they can try to get the high commodity. And they're learning the tricks if they don't already know the logistics industry. And there's so many loopholes here. It's insane. And we've put up with a lot, like the double brokering stuff. Like we've done that. That's been around forever. And the issue is, prior to it was making it to delivery. And we're like, shoot, this guy skimmed some off the top. But that was as the extent of it. We kind of just turned a blind eye. And then now it's like, no, nothing's making it there. We should have been more, I don't know, aggressive back then, but shoulda, woulda, coulda.
Yeah, I was talking to that reporter yesterday, and she's like, well, if they're working this hard, why wouldn't they just start their own company? And I said, well, ma'am, we're about a 3 to 5% profit margin industry, at least in trucking. And I said, they're getting 100% profit, I guess less the secondary transportation after they still have maybe a little overhead for the warehouses they have to lease. But this is a tough business. So to do it legitimately requires a lot of work and a lot of grit and a lot of determination. So I don't think anybody in our industry is hanging their hat on the hopes that they have become so proficient at theft that they're going to get in here as a legitimate company. It's a tough business. And so I seem to strike a chord with her.
Well, especially with low risk, right? Like the CHP guys were telling me, so they found a warehouse like all the way to the ceiling, all the way to the back, $13 million worth of stolen goods. The guy got convicted 8 years. This is in California. And served one, got out on good behavior. So 1 year for 13, probably a lot more than that. He's probably did this a lot longer, sold a lot of stuff, but $13 million for 1 year served time. And then shortly thereafter, they had another instance with the, theft happen. And they're like, this sounds a lot like, Joe or whatever his name is. And sure enough, they looked him up and he just got out. They went over to where his place was and saw that he rented another warehouse and he was at it again. So it's like, it's so low risk that why wouldn't you? It's like probably the lowest risk, highest reward thing out there, I think.
Yeah. I was talking to the reporter yesterday and she was like, what are they doing with their packaged potatoes? And I was like, honestly, I don't really know. They're probably turning around and representing themselves as a distributor to another country or somewhere else and just reselling this product, I would assume. I was like, I don't really have an answer for that, but I do know we had a whole truckload of energy drinks that was getting stolen from Houston out to LA. And I was told that energy drinks are outlawed in those Southeast Asian countries. So they were loading those on containers and shipping them over there. So
that's wild.
It's bizarre.
And even now, that's a lot of money to even ship them out. I think I do think they put a lot of things like Facebook Marketplace, and there's those websites that, like, I was talking to my friend the other day. She's like, "Oh, I just got this, Lululemon. It's really real, but yeah, I got it for like $10." I'm like, that's stolen cargo freight. That's one of my kids. Like, quit buying from them. You're the problem. Yeah,
exactly.
So they're doing everything they can to get it out there. I even heard where they stole from Amazon and then turned around and sold it through Amazon. So it's like, yeah, it's wild.
That's crazy. Yeah, there'll be an end. There will be an end, but I just don't know what it's going to be. It's getting interesting.
I know. I will see. Yeah, I think it'll probably get better. Like the banking industry, the fraud got better. It's not all the way gone. It's a lot better, manageable. Hopefully, we get there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you for having me on. This has been great. I hope you and your listeners get some value out of it, and we'll keep fighting the good fight.
Definitely. Thanks for coming on. It's really great to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you too. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.